Alright, here we are with a '02 basic Impreza sedan. This one's an automatic. I didn't want an automatic, but get what you get. I have a 5-speed at home. I just need a clutch to make it work, but for the basic kit, it doesn't matter if it's automatic or clutch or a standard. So we're just getting started. I pulled the airbox off, pulled the horn out. I'm just throwing all the bolts in a bucket and the parts will just get tossed aside. The idea is to get the motor out and transmission out. Up the front, drop the cross members, and get the steering wheel and the column out along with the brake booster. And if you have a standard, the clutch. The heat and stuff like that you're not going to use. Obviously, radiator you will use. If you're feeling up to it, cruise control can come and be reused. If you're going to use the whole harness, good for you. I have no cruise control. The washer bottle, some states require it. Pennsylvania required it. I used the generic one, but you can reuse that one. You can reuse just about everything. Will there be mounts on your chassis for that bottle? No, but they can easily be added, or you can just bolt it right to the firewall. The battery does not go up front anymore. The battery will be behind the passenger seat in front of the rear wheel. So the cabling will need to be modified for that, along with the fuel lines. You're not going to be able to get those fuel lines out of this chassis in one piece. Same with the brake lines. So don't waste your time with that kind of stuff. Brake lines and fuel lines are cheap and easy to run in the new chassis. Also, the pitch stop mount. You will not have a pitch stop mount. I never have had one. I've never had a problem. I ran stock mounts, group end mounts, and right now I'm actually using IAG mounts that look like these. I believe just about everyone makes their own version of it. Torque Solutions and all them guys. I like these because it kind of acts as a pitch mount. It doesn't let the motor go forward or backwards because of these brackets, and they actually work really well. So I'd recommend those. Like I said, we're just trying to get this cross member and the brake and clutch and steering rack, which actually a note on the steering rack is that U-joint, because of the new angle of the steering wheel being lower, I'll have to provide that U-joint, or you can ship me yours, or you could buy one of mine. It is cut, reclocked into a different rotation angle, and then welded back together to smooth out the steering. If you know anything about U-joints, they are very particular on angle cancellation, and when I put the factory mount in mine, the wheel would have hard spots where the U-joint is actually spinning up and slowing down the rotation of the front wheels. But all that is, as long as you have canceling joints, you can cancel out that just by changing the rotation or the angle of the U-joint itself. But that's a big reason why I wanted this, because this one has a standard Impreza joint and mine is using a Forester joint. So I want to be able to find the correct angle and pitch so that all the kits use a standard Impreza joint, not the extended Forester joint. Oh, that's that. I'm going to keep at it. Get this motor out, get that trans out, set them aside, and then get this cross member out, because this cross member is going in the jig to make them all the same. Alright, midday update. Motor's out. It's automatic. It's a real pain in the ass. Can't believe they still put automatics in cars. Anyway, motor's out. Power steering's just set to the side. I'm just going to drop it with the cross member and see where it's at. This is a bar on GDs. I don't know, I guess it's stiffen up the front end. You're not going to need it, throw it away. As you can see, what it probably looks like anyway. 2 of the bolts needed cut, the rest came out. These little brackets were up here in front of the sway bar links. I don't know what they were for. Cut them off, don't need them. That's it for now. I'm going to work on getting this slush box out of here, and then I'm going to unbolt the cross members and drag them over to the jig. Alright, later update. Trans is out over there. I'm building a pile of parts for in case Quist wants them back and sell them. Caraway does them. I might keep that block though. All he wanted was the bumper. So, bumper for sale. Anyway, cross members out. This is it. This whole thing basically will go into the chassis. It bolts up with these 2 holes here. That's just an alignment pin from the factory, I think. This holds your engine. Those are where the engine mounts go. Transmission sits on this side. It's a steering rack. Knuckles. All of this transfers over to the chassis. The suspension can, if you want to sit a little higher on factory suspension, that's fine. I put coilovers on mine. Basically, to get the cross member out, you have these 2 lower control arm bolts, 19mm heads. They come down. Most of the time they're pretty easy. They're captive nuts, so you got to be careful. If it doesn't want to come out, don't force it. Get it out as far as it'll come out easily and spray it with some lube, like PB Blaster, W40, whatever, liquid wrench, and let it sit and keep backing in and out. You do not want to break off the captive nuts that sit inside the chassis. Otherwise, you got to cut the chassis apart to, or the body apart to get a wrench on them, or you got to sawzall them out or something. Sawzall doesn't always work because once you break that nut off, it's loose. So when you try to sawzall it, it just goes back and forth. It doesn't actually cut. So do not break those off. Some of you will, especially in the rear, but it's not the end of the world. The axles I just left on. These are 02 style, 03 style, or like that. I think in 04 they changed the way they hook to the transmission. Knuckles are pretty much all the same. The ABS differs a little bit, but they all work the same. The rack stays. For now, I still have the power steering hooked up. It could probably stay hooked up the whole time. There's no real need to disconnect it, unless you want to get rid of your power steering. But then you got to take the rack out and do it the proper way to get rid of the power steering, because there's a piston in there that will cause you a lot of resistance if you leave it alone. Like I said, sway bar still hooked up. This whole thing just bolts right into the chassis. You can see on mine, these mounts will be on there, and you just bolt that cross member right to it. And like I said, the steering, that'll need to be modified. I'll supply a modified U-joint because it's not real simple to do. You gotta cut it apart, re-angle it, re-weld it so that it spins uniformly, consistently. Alright, tomorrow I'm going to try to get the rear out. It's not as well, it's just as bad because this thing is so rusted. If you're southern, you don't gotta worry about this stuff, but up here, PA, Ohio, New York stuff, it's a real pain to work on these older ones unless they've been taken care of. That's why that even exists, because my Forester was rusted like this, and that is not. It's like having a new car. That's very easy to work on, and fun, and cheap, and easy to maintain. You just can't drive it in the rain, unless you get wet. Alrighty. Alright, today update. Got the rear end down. One last thing is the fuel tank, but you got to pull the rear cross member to get to the fuel tank holder upper brackets. Fuel tank's actually pretty simple, but I think it has a lot of gas in it. I may or may not drain it. We'll see. These trailing arms, you're not going to need them. Those bolts almost always break off up inside the chassis. You can't get them out anyway. I just sawzalled the arm off. E-brake cable you should keep, but for my jig I don't need it, so I cut that in half too. The struts, they just unbolt from the tower inside the back seat. Pretty simple. I left everything alone. I cut the fuel or the brake lines because I don't use them either. You won't use those. Actually, you probably could keep the rubber section if you really wanted to, but stainless steel new lines are cheap. This T-bar, you won't need it. This bolt came out, the other one did not. I just cut it off with a sawzall. Same with that other trailing arm, sawzalled it off. These 4 bolts surprisingly came out, but as you can see the condition of this cross member, I might change up the design. I might do a tubular rear end to where all you would need is the diff. It'll bolt up into the cross member. It's something I've been wanting to do, and with the condition of these old GDs almost always being rusted out like this, I might do it. It'll simplify mounting the diff. You won't need the bar that goes up to the back of the cab, but we'll see. Maybe on a later model, maybe not on the 5x5. So yeah. Alright, time for the fuel tank. Be very careful here. Gas is flammable and sparks are a bad idea, so I'm only using this little hand saw blade, or this saw blade by hand, to cut through like the fuel filler tube. It's not going to come off. Don't waste your time. The little evap lines, the charcoal box I'm just leaving in. No need to take it out. There's a few little lines up in there you'll need to cut through. These 2 straps that hold it in, they come out relatively easily. I got a jack with a block of wood holding it up for now. If you got like a quad jack or a tranny jack or something, that's obviously better. My forklift doesn't reach under here, so just gonna have to be careful with it. Get those brackets out, these 2 straps, unbolt them, cut those lines by hand, no sparks. You can try to get them off with the clamps. I wish you luck. And then, alright, one more thing on the fuel tank. Those lines I was talking about, you actually don't have to cut them up there because they run attached to the tank down to here. So that's where you cut them. Back to the fuel tank. That connector again, don't have to disconnect it there. You can disconnect it here under the back seat and push it through this grommet. That'll help you once you get to this point where the tank's hanging here, but you're still fastened to that wire harness. So, you know, it's been a while since I did this, so we're all learning here. Disconnect it, push it through the grommet. Save yourself the trouble. Nothing actually needs disconnected at the sending unit at this time. Wire harness on this side, 3 fuel lines way over there. Alright, carry on.